cleaners පවුලේ ආරක්ෂාව සහතිකයි.
Tonight, disaster perspective. The Express Pearl owner apologizes for the environmental damage and adds that the financial impact on the company won't be high.
We are insured and the direct financial burden on Express will be very limited.
Won't be high. On the list, health authorities welcome the US administration's announcement of Sri Lanka's inclusion in its vaccine donation program. A matter of time, health experts says cases are expected to decline if restrictions stay in place, with high numbers attributed to PCR test expansion. Be alert. Heavy rains play havoc across the country as floods and landslides leave many stranded. All this and much more coming up on this Friday, the 4th of June 2021.
Pocket එකට fit වෙන new Axe Ticket perfume.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando in your top stories for tonight. The MV Express Pearl disaster has left the island having to deal with some challenging environmental ramifications, the biggest being a possible leak of the ship's 300 metric tons of fuel. The stricken vessel was inspected today by the Government Analyst Department along with the officials of the Criminal Investigation Department. Meanwhile, the Chief Executive Officer of the Express Feeders, Shmuel Yoskowitz, expressed deep regrets over the disaster and extended an apology to the Sri Lankan people for the damage caused.
With more than half of the MV Express Pearl currently submerged, monitoring efforts are currently underway to assess the threat of a large-scale oil spill. The vessel ran aground earlier this week after authorities were instructed to tow it into deeper waters. Part of the vessel is currently lying on the seabed at a depth of just 22 meters. The ship carries over 300 tons of fuel and other oils. Meanwhile, the Marine Environmental Protection Authority has called for a report every 3 hours from the team of salvors containing the latest updates on the ship's status. The ship, meanwhile, was inspected by the Government Analyst Department today along with officers of the Criminal Investigation Department. With it still being early days in investigations into the cause of the fire, the CID continues to record evidence from the ship's officials. CID investigators have so far recorded statements from 13 members, including the captain, chief engineer and the deputy chief engineer of the vessel.
Yesterday, the Criminal Investigation Department has recorded a statement from the Director General Merchant Shipping. In addition to that, the statement of the Chief Officer has been partly recorded. The Criminal Investigation Department is going to record a further statement from the Chief Officer, the person who is making plan in respect of the containers and cargo of the ship. In addition to that, the Criminal Investigation Department has obtained the copies of emails that have been exchanged between the captain and the mother company situated in Singapore. In addition to that, the emails exchanged with the local agent in Colombo.
Meanwhile, more minor oil slicks were visible today that many suspect to have leaked from the vessel. Our cameras also captured some very unfortunate scenes of the disastrous impact on the country's marine life. Meanwhile, a fundamental rights petition has been filed before the Supreme Court today, calling for a comprehensive probe into how the chemical-laden MV Express Pearl gained access into Sri Lankan waters. The petition was filed by Executive Director of the Centre for Environmental Justice, Hemantha Vithanage, along with a group of fishermen. The Sri Lanka Ports Authority, the Marine Environment Protection Authority, the Central Environmental Authority, Minister of Ports and Shipping Rohitha Abegunawardena, State Minister of Urban Development Dr. Nalaka Godaheva, Minister of Environment Mahinda Amaraveera and the National Aquatic Resources Research and Development Agency have been named as respondents. In the meantime, speaking to a foreign media outlet, Chief Executive Officer of Express Feeders, Shmuel Yoskowitz, today offered an apology for the destruction caused by the disaster.
I'd like to express my deep regrets and apologies to the Sri Lankan people for the harm this incident has caused both to their livelihood and to the environment of Sri Lanka. We have engaged the ITOP, which is an international tanker oil pollution fund, who are experts in monitoring environmental problems. We have been on the case since then. So far, there have been no oil pollution detected.
Yoskowitz added that the direct financial burden on the company will be limited due to its comprehensive insurance cover.
Very hard to assess the cost currently, but we are insured and the direct financial burden on Express will be very limited.
He also added that it remains too early to begin assessing compensation costs as well.
Absolutely. This is being now assessed, but we need to bear in mind that this will be a long process. First of all, to see when this incident will be over and then to assess the total damages. We have already started engaging the Sri Lankan Authority, both the Marine Environmental Protection Agency, and we are working in cooperation with Sri Lankan Navy. Cleaning up of beaches has started. Sri Lanka now is under a lockdown. It is very hard to mobilize people, and we are very thankful both to MIPA and to Navy for mobilizing people. We have contributed from our side some heavy equipment to help clean up the beaches, but we cannot engage now Sri Lankan people.
Yoskowitz also stated that while the vessel's crew did everything right to extinguish the fire at the initial stages, there is still no indication of what exactly caused the fire.
It's very hard to assess what caused the fire. There were many commodities on board the vessel, and there was one container leaking. So it does lead to a most probable cause, but we are not 100% sure. There is an International Maritime Dangerous Goods Convention that accordingly the crew has handled this leak. And so far what we have checked, they have handled it correctly.
කාලගුණය කොහොමුණත් රයිනෝ නං වාලට සේෆ් තමයි මුළු ගෙදරම.
The United States government has announced Sri Lanka's inclusion on its new global vaccine aid program that seeks to donate 25 million vaccine doses, both directly and indirectly, to countries in need. Confirming the announcement, State Minister Professor Channa Jayasumana, however, stated that no indication has been offered of how many and what type of vaccine will be provided to Sri Lanka.
The Biden administration announced earlier this week that it plans to send 25 million vaccines around the world before the end of this month. The US plan involves the sharing of 19 million of these doses through the COVAX program, while the remaining 6 million doses will be directly distributed to Asian countries that have been facing critical shortages. These countries include Taiwan, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Maldives, Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand and Laos, along with Papua New Guinea and the Pacific Islands. No indication was given, however, on the exact number of vaccines that will be donated to these specific countries. Delivering a statement on his administration's vaccine program, President Joe Biden said that the US is sharing the vaccines to save lives and not to secure favors or extract concessions. The United States, he added, will be the world's arsenal of vaccines in the shared fight against the virus. Meanwhile, State Minister for Production, Supply and Regulation of Pharmaceuticals, Professor Channa Jayasumana, confirmed that official requests have been made to the US administration for sufficient doses of Oxford AstraZeneca vaccines to administer a second round of vaccinations. He also revealed that Sri Lanka has been included in the first tranche of the US vaccine sharing program. However, no indication has been offered as to which type of vaccine is to be donated.
A Royal Australian Air Force C-17 Globemaster transport aircraft landed at the Mattala Rajapaksa International Airport today with a very special gift for Sri Lanka. The aircraft was carrying 2.3 tons of medical aid in the form of 9.4 million masks and 60 other packages of personal protection equipment. Director Operations at the Airport and Aviation Services Limited, Shehan Sumarnasekara, revealed that the Mattala Airport has been chosen by the Australian government to act as its central distribution hub for its program that will also see India and Nepal too receive aid.
Despite the global travel restrictions, the need for continued air operations has never been more urgent than today, as the need for vaccines and medical equipment for national pandemic efforts increases. With that, the Australian government has given the Mattala Rajapaksa International Airport a much-needed boost by choosing to base its ongoing medical aid delivery operations covering Sri Lanka, India and Nepal at the airport. The Airport and Aviation Services says that the Australian government's choice of Mattala is a vote of confidence in the airport's facilities and capabilities. With that, the first air movement in the Australian program happened today with the arrival of a C-17 Globemaster transport aircraft carrying 2.3 tons of medical aid for Sri Lanka, which was handed over to health authorities.
Today, the Australian government had decided to send in a flight to Mattala Rajapaksa International Airport and military aircraft, a C-17 type aircraft with medical supplies to the government of Sri Lanka as an aid from Australia. And we have today received 9.4 million masks and over 60 pallets of PPE kits totaling up to 2.3 tons of cargo coming into Mattala Airport today. Our Health Minister, Honourable Pavitra Wanyarachi, Honourable Nama Rajapaksa accepted that parcel today from the Australian High Commission. What's important to note is that this aircraft will be based out of Mattala for the next 2 days, and the Australian government will continue to use Mattala Rajapaksa Airport as a distribution hub for India and Nepal as well for this aid that they plan on providing those countries. So Mattala Rajapaksa Airport has been chosen by the Australian government to do this operation based out of Sri Lanka, which shows the confidence of Australian government today.
Even though Sri Lanka's daily COVID-19 infections are once again being reported in the 3,000 range, health authorities stated the reason for this spike as the rise in the number of PCR tests conducted and a broadening of its scope. Deputy Director General of Education and Research at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Hemantha Herath, said today that in the recent days, the first contacts of COVID-19 patients were subjected to PCR testing.
Sri Lanka's daily COVID-19 infections have once again risen past 3,000, despite the somewhat strict stay-home restrictions throughout the entire country. Deputy Director General of Education and Research at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Hemantha Herath, says that a similar spike was observed on the 21st of May and stated that the reason for the spike in cases as a broadening of the scope of PCR testing in the country. He, however, stated that he believes that the cases will wane in the coming days as restrictions continue.
අපේ වසංගත රෝග විද්‍යාංශයේ නිල වෙබ් අඩවියේ තියෙන ප්‍රස්ථාරය දිහා බැලුවොත් පේනවා දින 10කට පමණ ප්‍රථම මේ ආකාරයේම වැඩිවීමක් තිබුණා. ඒ වැඩි වුණු රෝගීන්ගේ ආශ්‍රිතයින්ගෙන් ගත්ත PCR පරීක්ෂණ විශාල සංඛ්‍යාවක් පහුගිය දිනවල කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒවායේ ප්‍රතිඵල හැටියට ලැබෙන කණ්ඩායම් තමා මේ විදිහට වැඩි වෙන්නේ. මේ පාලන ක්‍රියාවලිය මේ ආකාරයටම සිද්ධ වුණොත් සංඛ්‍යාත්මකව අඩුවීමක් අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ දින 10කට පෙර උපරිම සංඛ්‍යාව 3500 ඉක්මෝලා ගියා. අපි මේ අවතාවෙත් 3000 ගණනක් රෝගීන් ආවට පාලන ක්‍රමය නිවැරදිව සිද්ධ වෙනවා නම් මම හිතනවා ඒ තරමට වැඩි නොවි මේක පාලනය කරගන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්න ඕනේ.
Meanwhile, a total of 3,297 cases were reported yesterday by the epidemiology unit, with the Gampar district topping the daily caseload with 648 infections, while Colombo recorded 630. With the Kalathura district recording 409 cases, the Western Province once again had over 1,600 cases of the virus reported. Meanwhile, 187 infections were reported from Badulla, 185 from Galle, 141 from Mathura and 119 from Kegol. Further, the districts of Kurunegala reported 101 infections, while Anuradhapura confirmed 97 cases. A further 737 COVID-19 infections were reported across 16 other districts. In addition, 13 foreign arrivals were also part of yesterday's daily list of infections. 33 foreign arrivals were also part of yesterday's daily list of infections. In the meantime, Sri Lanka's total COVID-19 related deaths rose by 42 to 1,608 yesterday. The Department of Government Information stated that the deaths occurred between the 11th of May and 3rd of June. 16 of the victims were reported to be between 70 to 79 years of age. According to the department, 8 of the victims died at home, while 3 died on admission to hospitals. The remaining 31 had passed away while under treatment at hospitals. Meanwhile, on developments on the vaccination front, first doses of the Sinopharm vaccine were administered to 45,047 people yesterday. In addition, 795 people were administered with the AstraZeneca vaccine yesterday, bringing the number of people to have received the second dose to 350,958. The Russian-made Sputnik vaccine was also administered to 2,283 people yesterday. In the meantime, 1,884 patients recovered from COVID-19 today, pushing the overall tally to 164,281. As such, the active cases in the country rose by 2,735 today, placing the total figure at 32,690.
Police media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana announced today that a special operation to authenticate all those who enter Colombo has been launched and has requested all travelling under the umbrella of essential services to carry their relevant passes and IDs with them at all times. Despite the need for the public to travel during the lockdown to engage in essential services, Deputy Director General of Education and Research Dr. Hemantha Herath urged the public to stick to necessary travel only.
With an island-wide lockdown currently in place, the general public is only allowed to move about, to obtain medical treatment and to purchase medication from nearby pharmacies. Excluding these two situations, the only other group allowed to travel during the restrictions are those employed in sectors deemed essential. However, there are continuous attempts by some members of the public to flout the regulations and move about during the travel restrictions, a clear violation of quarantine law.
886 suspects have been arrested in connection with the offences of quarantine rules and regulations within a period of last 24 hours. Total number of 21,975 suspects have been arrested since the 30th of October 2020. In addition to that, we are implementing 14 roadblocks at the exit and entry point of Western Province. 4,191 persons have been checked along with 2,369 vehicles. However, 2,705 persons have been sent back to their original places whilst they were trying to cross the provincial border, violating quarantine rules and regulations.
Meanwhile, Deputy Director General of Education and Research at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Hemantha Herath, stated that the number of vehicles moving about in Colombo has increased as a result of essential service employees travelling to their places of employment. However, he requested people to limit unnecessary travel and to avoid gathering in groups, as the sacrifice made during the restricted period would be in vain if COVID-19 cases continue to rise.
We have observed increasing number of vehicles coming into Colombo and also in and around Colombo and in other suburban areas. And I believe that this is basically because of the limitation of the public transport. Most of people have to use their own personal vehicles to travel to their offices and other places where essential services are required. However, I would like to emphasize and inform the public that wherever possible, it is important to restrict our movements and limit our presence especially in crowded places and other places where people are closely gathered, so that the possibility of spreading the disease within these places will be minimized. And also I would like to urge the employers and also the heads of the government institutions to limit the issuing of letters and other permission to the employees, to those who really need to come and they are really performing something, contributing contributing to maintenance of the essential services in the country. Thereby, we will be able to make sure that the real benefits of this sacrifice that we have already been making in this travel restriction period.
Speaking further on the issue, Police Media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana added that a special operation has been launched to verify people entering the Colombo district claiming to belong to essential service sectors.
We have deployed special police teams in order to check whether the employees serving at the particular institute according to the letter, and we are obtaining details at the checkpoints situated in the suburbs areas of Colombo city. So therefore, all the time obey with quarantine rules and regulations, and whenever police are asking documents or IDs, kindly provide such documents or IDs, then you can get the sticker and you can proceed.
In the meantime, the Department of Government Information reported that a suspension on issuing vehicle revenue licenses in the Western Province has been further extended. As such, fines for non-renewal will not be charged for the travel restriction period. Issuing a notice, Deputy Chief Secretary to the Western Province W.M. Dayavati stated that fines will not be imposed for the revenue licenses that expire during this period, and also that revenue licenses can be obtained by visiting the website of the Western Province Motor Traffic Department.
Kamalaya, the manufacturers of the Russia-developed Sputnik V COVID-19 vaccine, have confirmed the delivery of another consignment to Sri Lanka. State Minister of Production, Supply and Regulation of Pharmaceuticals, Professor Channa Jayasumana, confirmed today. With that, 15,000 second doses and 50,000 first doses of Sputnik V are expected to arrive in Sri Lanka next Friday. Russia delivered the second batch of Sputnik V jabs consisting of 50,000 doses to Sri Lanka on the 28th of May, in keeping with a purchase order placed by the State Pharmaceuticals Cooperation to boost the island's inoculation drive. The first batch of the vaccine, consisting of 15,000 doses, was delivered in early May. Inclement weather wreaking havoc across the country has killed 3 people while 3 others remain missing. According to the Disaster Management Centre, 130,672 people belonging to 31,303 families have been affected by the adverse weather conditions. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa today instructed officials to provide immediate relief to the people affected.
Around 6 this morning, heavy rains in the area of Ihalapula in Ratnapura led to a landslide, leaving a nearby house in ruins. A 50-year-old woman residing in the house at the time of the incident was rescued from under the debris and was admitted to the Horana hospital with head and leg injuries. An operation was then launched by the army along with the area residents in search of her missing daughter and another individual. By noon, the body of a 16-year-old girl was recovered from under the debris. Operations, however, continue to find the missing 64-year-old. Meanwhile, the body of a 21-year-old youth who drowned while swimming in the Kadupeti Oya in Maravilla was found today. CCTV cameras installed nearby had captured the youth swimming in the overflowing waters of the Kudapiti Oya. Meanwhile, a 15-year-old student remains missing after the bank of the Kudapiti Oya he was seated on collapsed and fell into the body of water. In Milania Horana, the body of a 41-year-old father of one was found after he drowned while swimming under the Okanduva bridge. Meanwhile, a 20-year-old youth in Pandua Snore is also missing after jumping into the overflowing waters of the Kalubulu Oya. Meanwhile, several classrooms of the Tamil Mahavidyalaya in Ratnapura were heavily damaged by a landslide. In the meantime, a number of areas across the country have been affected by heavy floods brought on by the torrential rains. The heavy deluge experienced in Udampahalagedara resulted in the overflowing of the Kalubulu Oya, which has now inundated the Naramala-Panduasluwara road. Meanwhile, a number of roads remain submerged due to the downpour experienced during the past couple of days. The Nittambu-Hanwala road was also seen inundated, disrupting vehicular movement. Meanwhile, a tipper truck transporting soil along the Millennium-Moranthuduva road was tipped over by raging floodwaters. In Colombo too, several roads were seen flooded as storm drains overflowed. The Sri Lanka Air Force in the meantime has dispatched a Bell 412 helicopter to monitor floods across the country. The onset of the southwest monsoon has brought on heavy showers across many parts of the country, with Dumalasuri experienced the heaviest rainfall in the past 24 hours of 346.7 millimeters. With that, the National Building Research Organisation has extended landslide warnings for the districts of Colombo, Galle, Kalutara Kegalle, Mathura and Ratnapura.
The Sri Lankan Navy today dispatched its vessel SLNS Sayura to bring ashore an injured fisherman for emergency medical treatment. According to a Navy statement, crew member on board trawler had been in critical condition after sustaining an injury during an accident about 345 nautical miles from the Great Basses Lighthouse. The SLNS Sayura was rushed to the location and the injured crewman was placed in the hands of the vessel's medical crew for treatment. The fishing trawler had ventured out for fishing from the Tangol Fisheries Harbour on the 21st of April. Having retrieved the injured fisherman, the SLNS Sayura is now headed back to shore and is expected to arrive at the port of Hambantota tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka has barred passengers with a travel history to South America and South Africa, including transit, in the past 14 days from disembarking in the country. The ban will be enforced with immediate effect until further notice, the Civil Aviation Authority announced in a media release issued today. Director General of Civil Aviation and Chief Executive Officer Captain Themia Abevikrama stated that all airlines have been informed of this decision. Further, the CAA noted that previous bans imposed on incoming passengers with a travel history including transit to India and Vietnam in the past 14 days will continue to be in effect. Welcome back. In other news, Sri Lanka stocks closed 0.68% higher today, with the All Share Price Index gaining by 51.18 points to close at 7,567.38. The S&P SL20 index of more liquid stocks gained 0.68% or 20.71 points to close at 3,046.47, while the overall market turnover was 3.2 billion rupees. Here's Dimantha Matthew with your daily update on the market performance.
The bullishness in the market is moving on for yet another day as the investors glow in confidence levels, mainly because of the very strong earnings that has been released in the first quarter of 2021. Overall earnings is up by around over 200%, which has given a significant amount of confidence for most of the investors. So with this, we are seeing today the market up by around 51 points, closing in at 7,567 points. Even the S&P SL20 index is up by around 20 points to end at 3,046. Overall, we are seeing buying interest coming into the diversified financial sector, capital goods sector and the material sector. Also, we are seeing strong buying interest in the transportation sector as well. So with this, you can see that most of these counters are the counters with very strong earnings that has been released, and most of these counters are trading at undervalued prices.
The rupee once again remained unchanged today at 202 rupees and 88 cents against the US dollar after ending at the same rate yesterday. Now let's have a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. I'm Shanella Fernando. Have a good night.